Today's lesson is Chapter 8, Lesson 2, Function Rules. You have 4 vocabulary terms. The first one is sequence, then we have term, arithmetic sequence, and geometric sequence. So a sequence is a list of numbers in a specific order. So below here, I'm going to draw an arrow through. Both of these have sequences because it's a list of numbers in a specific order. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. We're just adding 3 each time. And then there's 3, 6, 12, 24, 48. And those are just getting doubled or times 2 each time. Okay? And then a term is each number in that list. So the terms in the first list are 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. The terms in the next list are 3, 6, 12, 24, 48. So basically, it's what you call the number in a list. The last 2 terms are different types of sequences. So that means they're both going to include lists of numbers. The first one is arithmetic sequence. So what that means is that you're just adding the same number each time. So in this list or sequence, we're just adding 3. So the big thing for arithmetic sequence is to know that you're just adding. So I remember it by thinking A equals add. So arithmetic, you're just adding each time. For geometric sequence, it says each term is found by multiplying the previous number by the same number. So for this list, 3, you have to go by times 2 to get to 6 times 2. That gets us to 12 times 2. 24 to 48 is times 2. So this time we're not adding, it's geometric, and you're just going to be multiplying. This one I don't have a trick for. So basically just know that arithmetic means add, and then you'll know that the other one is just multiply. So for this lesson, you're going to be given a list of numbers, and you need to figure out what the pattern is. So the pattern could either be arithmetic pattern, and like we said, that's adding, or it could be geometric pattern, which is multiply. Or sometimes it can be both. But first we'll just start off with one or the other. So the first thing, what you need to do is describe the relationship. So I'm going to look at this first list of numbers, 7, 14, 21, and 28. And I notice the relationship is that it's adding 7 each time. And I can check that because if I take 28 away or 21 away from 28, I get 7. 14 away from 21, I get 7. 7 away from 14, I get 7. So I'm just looking at the pattern. And so I described it. Now I need to decide if it's arithmetic or geometric. And I can see that it's arithmetic because I'm adding. So I'm going to put an A. And then I need to write the 3 next terms. So I'm going to write the 3 next terms if I continue to add 7 each time. So 28 plus 7 would give me 35. 35 plus 7 would give me 42. And then another 7 would give me 49. Okay, now I'm going to do this next list, and I need to do the same thing, and I'm going to do that in red. So I need to describe the relationship. So I notice 2 to 4, that could be plus 2, and then I'm going to check to see if that keeps working. So plus 2, 4 plus 2 is not 8, that's 6, so that one's going up by 4. And that one's going up by 8. So I can tell myself, that is not adding the same number each time. So it's not an adding one. So I need to figure out what it is. Well, if I take 2 times 2, I get 4. If I do 4 times 2, I get 8. If I do 8 times 2, I get 16. So I can know that it's being multiplied by 2. That's describing the relationship. Decide if it's arithmetic or geometric. Well, multiplication is geometric. And then the next 3 terms, I just need to multiply each one by 2. So 16 times 2, that gives me 32. 32 times 2, I'm just going to double it, so I get 64. And then 64 times 2, double that. 4 and 4 is 8, 6 and 6 is 12, so 128. So those would be my next 3 terms. And that's just going off of a list of numbers. Okay, so we can do this with a table too. So I have my list, but they might not always give it to you just in a list. They might put it in a table. So notice that I have 8, 16, 24, 32. Well, I have those same numbers right here. 8, 16, 24, 32. And that's in my value row. And then I have position. So for 1, I get 8. 2, 16, 3, 24, 4, 32, and 5, I don't know. I'm going to have to figure out what number goes here. Okay, so what I want to do first is I want to figure out what's going on with these numbers. So I'm going to describe the relationship. So if you want to take those numbers and put them out here on a list, sometimes that can be easier, or you can just use that in the table. I see if I add 8 plus 8, I get 16. If I add another 8, I get 24. And if I add another 8, I get 32. So I know that it's adding, so that's an arithmetic. And then the next number, or the next term that I would get would be 40. So I know that 40 would go there. And that's just telling me that it's in a table, and then it's just a little bit more organized that way. Now that I have my term figured out and my pattern figured out, and I realize that it's an arithmetic pattern, I can create a rule. Okay? Notice they never gave us a rule. We kind of had to figure it out by ourselves. So, a trick that I can tell you is that if you're adding by a number every time, your rule means you are going to take whatever number you added. So here we added 8 every time. You're going to do that 8 times x. Okay, that's just a trick to get you started with your rule. Then you have to go back and make sure your rule works. Okay, so this is my rule that I have so far. Now I'm going to see if it checks out with each one. Remember, this is x and this is y. So if I plug in 8 times my x, which is 1, do I get my answer? Yes, I do. But I'm not just going to check one, I'm going to check a couple. 2 times 8, because remember I have to plug in my rule. And I get 16 down here, that's my answer. 3 times 8. That's 24. That works. So now that I've checked 3, I should know that my rule for this list or this table is 8x. Okay, so that's the rule. Okay, for this part of the video, we have a word problem, we have a table, and we need to fill in the table in order for it to make sense. As you can see, our table looks very similar to what we did in lesson 1. We have our input, our output, and what goes into the middle, our rule. Our input is always the letter X, our output is always the letter Y. And we don't quite know what our rule is yet. Usually they give us a rule to tell us what the input and how it will affect the output. So now that we know the parts of the table, I see that there are some blank areas in the table that we need to fill in. So let's go ahead and read the problem. The table shows, that should say shows, the number of necklaces Ari can make based on the number of hours she works. Write a function rule to find the number of necklaces she can make in X amount of hours. So we know that our X, our input is our hours, and our Y is the number of necklaces. Okay? The way to figure out a rule, well, let me back it up. In our previous lesson, they have always given us the rule. They usually give us the output, the input, the rule, and then we have to determine the output. Or they'll do it the other way, where they give us the output, they give us the rule, we worked backwards to figure out the input. This time, they're giving us just the input and the outputs, and we have to figure out the rule. So the way to figure that out is you kind of have to guess and check. But the first step to do is to see your pattern, what I just talked to you about. You got to look at these numbers over here in your output, and you got to see what the pattern is. Well, I see right away that they're adding 2 each time, okay? And I know when you add 2, or when you're doing an arithmetic sequence, that always means your rule is going to be that number that you keep adding multiplied by x, okay? So I'm going to plug in my input for x and see if it works. So I have 2 times my input, which is 1. Well, heck, Miss Conlon, that doesn't give me 5. Okay, so I'm going to kind of guess here, and I'm going to say, well, maybe I need to add something to that to get me to 5. So I know 2 times 1 is 2. How could I get to 5? I could add 3. Okay, so maybe my rule is 2x plus 3. Let's try it with 2 as our input. So 2 times 2 is 4, plus 3 is 7. Ooh, it works. Let's keep going. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 3 is 9. Okay, so if it works for these 3, I'm guessing it's going to continue to work. So now I need to try 4. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 3 would give me 11. And then for this n, let's just leave it with an n, and it would be 2 times n plus 3, and we'd put 2n plus 3. And if, say that was 5, like it would keep going in the pattern, then we know our answer would be 13. So the biggest thing when you have to create a rule is to look at the pattern. So you might want to write this down. To create a rule, you must look at the pattern, and if it's getting added by something every time, you know that, say it's getting added by 3 each time, you know it would be 3x. And then you plug that back into your input to see if it works. And if it doesn't, then you're going to have to guess and check to figure it out. Okay, so that's going to be our lesson. We'll probably go over some more things in class about this to practice, but that's all I have for you.